All right, good morning, everyone. I'm gonna call the to order here and get started on our last day of our December meeting. We're gonna start with the Inflation Reduction Act governance projects. So we're gonna get a presentation from Brandon and Kylie on staff. Michelle Bachman from New England Fishery Management Council is joining us remotely, I believe. Good. And we also have a couple folks in person here, Percy Nickerson and Aaron Kornbluth joining us. So I'll turn it over to staff to get us started on that. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks for putting some time on the agenda to talk about these projects. We're going to give a short overview of these IRA governance projects that we have along the East Coast amongst all three of the councils. I think there's a lot of opportunity here where we're going to be updating and reviewing the council's procedures and our use of advisory bodies and committees. And so I think there's a lot of space here, a lot of interest potentially in terms of how the councils operate internally and with each other and with the commission. So I think it's a really important, some really important projects for you all to be aware of and what we're doing here. And so, as Joe said, this is going to be an interactive presentation in the theme of collaboration. We're going to have a bunch of us give the presentation. I'll cover the Mid-Atlantic Council's projects and give an overview of the governance projects in general. Then we'll turn it over to Michelle and then Percy and Aaron to wrap it up with the South Atlantic Council projects. And so just as a refresher, back in 2023 and into 2024, NOAA Fisheries made $20 million available to all 8 regional councils to support projects related to the development of climate-related fisheries management and implementation efforts. So all councils have a number of different projects in terms of their size and their scope. I don't know how many total projects there are across all 8 councils, but quite a bit of work. And again, $20 million distributed across all of the councils. And so when the councils were asked to develop their projects, NOAA Fisheries had identified 4 or 5 different priority areas, and one of them being operationalizing recommendations from scenario planning efforts. And so there had been a few of those around the country. As many of you are aware, we had a significant effort here on the East Coast that wrapped up in 2023 with our East Coast Scenario Planning Summit, and out of that developed a number of action items. And you'll see these projects in particular, the governance projects, were really informed by that scenario planning effort. And so many of our council projects, in particular the Mid-Atlantic Council projects, not just these governance projects, require a lot of cross-council coordination and involvement. Almost all of our oversight teams that we have for our 8 projects have staff from New England, the Commission, South Atlantic, just because the issues that we're tackling within a number of our IRA projects, cover the scope and sort of fisheries that include all of those regions. So all 3 East Coast councils have at least one governance project, and you'll see those projects in a slide coming up. And so there's a lot of coordination effort taking place to track all of these projects, the governance projects in particular. And so out of our East Coast Scenario Planning project, the East Coast Coordination Group was formed. And the main focus to date of that group, which includes leadership from all 3 councils, the Commission, the 2 regional offices, and the 2 science centers, has been primarily focused on tracking the IRA projects and everything that's happening there. And so there's a lot of coordination going on there at the leadership level. There's also a lot of coordination going on at the staff level. Kylie meets with staff from New England and South Atlantic monthly or more frequently, potentially. The coordination group also has a core team of representatives of technical staff that serve all of those organizations that meet frequently to review all of these projects and coordinate on them. And the contractors for these projects are also meeting and coordinating on these efforts as well. So a lot is happening behind the scenes to make sure we're all sort of tracking each other and building our efforts. So out of the scenario planning project, you'll see these governance projects really picked up on, some of those outcomes. And so there's some themes that really cut across all of the projects along the three councils. They're different in regards to what they may exactly tackle or how they go about reviewing some of these things. But here's generally what all of these projects are going to look at. They include the use and representation of the council advisory bodies. So the use of committees, our APs, SSEs, any body that's giving, advice to the councils and how that functions, who sits on those committees or APs, and sort of thinking through all of the engagement parts of that. Looking at our joint and cooperative management arrangements that we have, not only with the two councils, but with the commission. The use of council liaisons that are sitting here at the table, and when our council goes to the other, when our council members are at other councils, so looking at the role of the liaisons, and then sort of any other cross-jurisdictional sort of issues and how we can respond to, changing environment, changing stock distributions. How can we be more responsive, and thinking through how we can set up our governance and management structures to be responsive to that. And so there's a lot on this slide. These are all of the specific projects amongst the three councils that are directly related to governance, the governance projects. And I don't plan to go through all of this. You'll see some of the details on these as we go through some of the projects later on. I just wanted to give you a sense that there are a number of projects across the three councils looking at governance related issues. And these are the governance specific projects. The Mid-Atlantic Council, for example, has our IRA project number 7 is developing a framework and indicators to evaluate stock distribution changes and governance issues. So there's a connection to governance in some of our other projects. It's not directly like governance focused, but there are some connections there. And so just a couple other takeaways from this slide is most of the projects related to governance have started already. We have contractors in place for nearly all of the projects as well. And sort of the timelines in regards to when these projects are going to be wrapping up. You'll see a few of them got started early on, and some of them will be wrapping up in spring to summer of next year, and other ones will be wrapping up in early 2027. But 2026 is going to be a key year for a lot of our governance projects. Lots is going to be happening across the board. And so, as I mentioned earlier, given the cross-jurisdictional considerations and the extensive overlap in all of these IRA projects, the coordination group has really been involved in coordinating some aspects of the IRA governance projects. We're really trying to avoid duplicating efforts and making sure we're getting the best results out of all of these individual projects. So back in May, the coordination group came up with this process in terms of how we were going to coordinate and track the IRA governance projects. And so the first one, again, which came out of that May meeting of the coordination group, is that all of the councils were going to work in parallel to document our existing advisory body and joint management processes. And you'll see those as we go through the different projects this morning. There's going to be a staff-to-staff workshop, and I'll touch upon that in the next slide or two. That's really going to dive into some of the staff perspectives on the current structures and processes and come up with some brainstorming ideas. And then sometime in 2026, we're going to hold a larger governance workshop to get into some of the details, and I'll touch upon that in the next slide as well. So specifically to the Mid-Atlantic Council's governance project, this is our IRA Project 3, improving Mid-Atlantic Council governance structures and processes. And so these objectives for this project were really informed by our scenario planning project, but also informed by the council's program review that we completed in 2024. There are some recommendations out of the program review are found within these objectives as well. And I just want to also put in some context that these objectives really get at trying to think about, we already have a complex management structure on the Atlantic coast to begin with, given all of the councils and the commission and all of the states involved in fisheries management. But those processes and the structures that we created, were really thinking about sort of a static or sort of constant sort of, fisheries dynamics taking place. Well, as we know now, a lot's happening out in the environment. Stocks are moving around, and made a complicated management system, governance system even more complicated. And so that's what these objectives are really trying to dig into. And so objective one of this is just to review and document all of the council's procedures and internal documents that we have in terms of the representation and use of all of our committees and advisory bodies. We're going to take that information and move into actually develop some recommendations of how we could improve those processes and procedures with our committees and advisory bodies. So that's the objective 1 and 2 really build off of each other. Objective 3 is a little bit different. That's going to looking at our joint and cooperative agreements that we have with the New England Council, with the Commission, and what we might do with the South Atlantic Council. We kind of have some pieces, some scraps of paper, some emails in different places that Mary's been able to dig up and try to understand how we work. But the South Atlantic Council, we're kind of figuring things out as we go along in terms of how we're going to work on some technical issues with the South Atlantic, particularly on blue line tilefish. There is nothing formally written down or how we're actually going to operate. And so we're kind of figuring those things out. So that's what objective 3 is really getting at, is how do we address those particular agreements? And then finally, for us, here's just a quick snapshot of sort of the tasks that we are hoping to come out of our particular project. So we're in phase 1 right now. Our contractors are on board. We have Kim Gordon, Deirdre Bolke, and Sean Lucy, who have tons of experience and expertise, sort of bringing in all of these different components that we're looking to work on. So they started in October. They're already digging into reviewing our existing policies and procedures, identifying priority FMPs that we really want to focus on, thinking about folks that they want to start conducting some targeted interviews on. And right now, the focus is really getting ourselves to this workshop, which is going to be held in late February. So 3 to 4 staff from the 3 councils and the commission are going to be getting together to sort of talk about how we function now, what are the different issues and things we need to be thinking about, and sort of brainstorming some ideas. So that's the key part of phase 1. We'll take all of that information, build into phase 2. So phase 1 is sort of documenting our current stuff. Phase 2 is thinking about, well, what kind of changes do we want to make to our existing processes? Where can we make improvements? And so that's where phase 2 really is focused. And the key piece here is this East Coast Governance Workshop, which is going to bring managers, leadership, and staff from the councils and commission and NOAA fisheries together to talk through some of these ideas and how do we want to move forward with making some changes to our governance structures. And so that's the sort of introduction and where we are at with the Mid-Atlantic Council stuff. I'm going to turn over to Michelle Bachman from New England, and she's going to go over New England's IRA projects next.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for inviting me to speak. Thanks, Brandon and Kylie, for coordinating and for putting together the presentation. There's a lot I don't have to cover because we're working together so closely, and the work we're doing is in many ways very similar to the work that your council is doing that Brandon just shared. So in addition to the habitat work I've been doing for the council for a long time, I'm the staff member who's kind of overseeing and helping to coordinate all of our Inflation Reduction Act projects. So I'm kind of the best person to talk to you about these, but we have other staff that are leading some of these specific efforts. And so, we have a lot of involvement. I'll talk at the end about kind of who's involved in some of these different initiatives. But I think Brandon really covered a lot of this. Kind of why are we focused on the need to prepare ourselves for making potential governance changes? Kind of why do we need to look at our processes and procedures and think about effectiveness, efficiency? It's really because species are shifting, expanding their ranges, contracting ranges. We're not operating in any kind of stable system if we ever were, but we're really not now. And so I just wanted to kind of send you to the action menu if you haven't revisited it in a while. It is a living document of the coordination group, and it's something that we revise, that the core team working with the coordination group is revising annually. As Brandon noted, a lot of the work of the coordination group is centered on these Inflation Reduction Act projects, and we're moving more quickly through some of these action menu items than I think we'd anticipated coming out of the summit, just because we have the opportunity with these Inflation Reduction Act funds. But the action menu is still really kind of our touchstone of what are we hoping to achieve and kind of how are we getting there. So governance was one theme. We also had themes about managing under uncertainty and kind of data sources and how we partner with each other. But that's the focus for today. So next slide. So I'm going to talk about 2 of our Inflation Reduction Act initiatives. We have 6 total. Our initiative 5 is our holistic strategic plan. Initiative 4, which I'll talk about next, is our projects that are related to sort of the ideas from the scenario planning summit. We're also doing some work to incorporate climate and ecosystem information into management, think about dynamic reference points, think about other data sources, consider ecosystem component species, evaluate our acceptable biological catch control rules in the context of the Council's revised risk policy concept and moving that towards implementation. And then we also have a project that's about kind of communicating better with those that are involved in our Council's process, revamping our website, automating some procedures that we go through. They're all very interrelated. We have a kind of umbrella project that's cutting through all of these and related to our core fishery management work about updating data processes and procedures. There's a lot we share with you in terms of how we're using information from the Science Center and State of the Ecosystem reports. So it's a big portfolio, and it really interleaves with our core fishery management work that we're doing, but it lets us kind of take a step back from that and really kind of set ourselves up to be effective moving forward. And so that's, I think, what these funds are really allowing us to do is kind of do some of these projects that let us change maybe our processes or kind of rethink how we're doing our work. So the strategic plan, talking about that first, because it's the first contract that we got up and running out of our IRA portfolio. It's really pretty foundational to our whole effort because our focus with the strategic plan is on kind of looking inward at how we're doing our work, where we've been successful, where we've seen some challenges, kind of using those together to think about what are some solutions that we might implement. We are going to be working towards a vision for kind of what New England fisheries can be in the next 10 years, what the Council can look like and how we operate, where we want to get to. Out of that vision, we'll have some high-level goals, and then we'll also be developing an implementation roadmap to achieve those goals, and then what metrics do we need to be tracking to just assess our performance. This strategic plan project is really closely related to the governance efforts because we are using a lot of the information that is being assembled during the discovery phase. That includes both kind of thinking about our own procedures, but then also benchmarking the New England Council against other similar organizations, including the Mid-Atlantic Council. So we're going to be using that information gathered to support our governance workshops. So unlike where your council has Kim Gordon and Deirdre Volke and Sean Lucy directly supporting your governance projects, we're kind of borrowing the discovery from the holistic strategic planning work that the Partner Group, who you're familiar with, is doing for us, along with Linker Corporation, to support those workshops. And then we'll have some additional work at the staff level to assemble some information. So this is a really exciting project. We're kind of just kind of hitting the point where we really start talking about the hard issues. So I'm looking forward to the next steps here. I'll talk about those in a bit. Next slide, please. Thanks. So we've got a collection of projects. We probably could have called these one project, but they have some separate objectives and some separate staff that are involved. So it numbered them as 3 separate projects under our IRA Initiative 4, which is, again, implementing scenario planning outcomes. So many of the objectives look very similar to what Brandon presented to you in terms of your governance project. one thing that we are thinking about here that's maybe kind of specific and a little nuanced relative to kind of the general outline that Brandon provided is that we're thinking about, the number of fishery management plans we have and whether, and there's a lot of interrelation. A lot of our plans are kind of linked back to our groundfish plan through exemptions and things like that. And just thinking about, is the structure of how we organize our fishery management plans optimal? Is it kind of the most efficient way that we could be working? There's definitely some trade-offs there in terms of kind of lumping or splitting apart groups and conversations and different issues. And so it would require some real thought to see if we wanted to do any revisions there, but that is a part of our conversation here. We want to use the opportunity to, be thoughtful about our work and reorganize under IRA to maybe create some efficiencies so we can create some space to do some overarching work going forward. So particularly we're thinking about our skate and our monkfish plan, which is joint with you, and seeing kind of where we can bring some conversations together and maybe be a little more efficient in how we're holding meetings and things like that, since there is a lot of overlap. Those groups have generally been meeting together for a while now, and so exploring those issues is definitely a big part of this project. We, definitely are recognizing kind of an ever-changing political funding resource availability landscape, and so even as compared to when we put these proposals together and initiated these projects, we want to be really mindful of kind of creating structures that are going to be robust to changes in resources. And because we recognize that, folks are involved in both councils, maybe all 3 East Coast councils and the commission process, if we can be consistent regionally, that, saves us time, that allows us to borrow best practices from each other. It hopefully makes it easier for people to engage in our processes. So trying to collaborate, thinking about what we can do on our own, but also what are the things we really need to do together. And then the other part of this is we do plan our regional operating agreement with NOAA Fisheries is a little old. I think now with all this work we've been doing and just kind of the changes that are happening and changes to NEPA guidance, it's a really good time to kind of clarify our role as an organization relative to regional office at the Science Center, and update and refresh that operating agreement. So that's kind of a later, kind of towards the end of this project, we'll be beginning to do that work. And I think it makes sense to do that at the end of this kind of series of workshops that Brandon talked about. Next slide. So the other analysis that's bundled under our implementing scenario planning initiative action ideas is this portfolio analysis. And wanted to mention this because this analysis will be focused on species and kind of gears and fleets that are commercial harvest of species that are managed by both the New England Council and the Mid-Atlantic Council, because there's often a ton of overlap. We've gotten this question a couple of times. Recreational harvest we recognize it's it's super important. To your council, I think a little bit more so than ours, but it's outside the scope of the way that these models and analyses are designed. Might be something to think about in the future. But really the point of this portfolio analysis is to look at the kind of groupings of species that are being harvested by different fleets and different years in different areas. And then think about kind of overall kind of harvest on a annual basis over recent years. And how is that comparing to the catch limits we're setting, and where are the gaps? Like, where's the daylight between what could be harvested according to the limits the councils are setting and what is being harvested? And I think there may be many reasons for those gaps, but if the way that the permits are structured is part of the problem there that's preventing us from achieving more yield, then kind of using this opportunity to kind of think about how we might make some updates there. Obviously, that's going to require engagement with permit holders and getting some sense of like what the challenges are and what the opportunities might be, what people that are out fishing under these permits see as some opportunities. Right now, we're kind of working in the background, and we haven't shared a lot with our council, and we haven't started any outreach yet, but that's something to come. So you'll probably hear more about that. And then after we get through the IRA period, then move into like an implementation phase of any changes that the council sees as warranted. So those would be like a council action. So next slide, please. So just considering kind of the last 3 slides and those projects that I was talking about, some things that are happening in the near term. We're working with our contractor, the Partner Group, to convene a holistic strategic plan development workshop. That's really aimed mostly at New England Council members, although some folks from the Mid-Atlantic, Mr. Roll, I think, and Mr. Didden will be attending, as well as some folks from the commission and some NOAA partners. So that'll be right after the holidays. We'll be getting together to talk about vision, goals, start to map out implementation, as well as think about evaluation metrics that we might be using. If you want to hear a recap of where we get to in terms of the vision and goals and kind of where we're going next, we will be providing that in our virtual January council meeting, which is going to be the Wednesday and Thursday of the last week of January. I'm not sure if we posted the agenda yet, but if not, it's coming very soon. So if you're interested in our kind of process and how this strategic plan work is going, I encourage you to check in there. Brandon talked about the staff-to-staff workshop. Appreciate that Mid-Atlantic Council has provided the facilitation support for that workshop, and thanks to the South Atlantic for coordinating some of the logistics there. And then in April, we will be doing a broader IRA session at our meeting. Our April meeting is, I think, now going to be up in, so you can look for us there. You can find us online. But if you want to hear about in more detail some of our IRA initiatives, that'll be happening in our April. Next slide. Longer term, move into implementation of the strategic plan. We'll do this broader East Coast governance workshop. We'll be the host for that, so it'll be somewhere in New England. We will begin outreach on this portfolio analysis, shareholders and others. We'll move into planning a workshop to update regional operating agreements. And then as a kind of through line through all of this, we'll be coordinating through the East Coast Coordination Group, working with the core team. Next slide. Yeah, and then just finally, as Brandon noted, this obviously involves a bunch of partners. Across our staff, many are involved in initiatives 4 or 5, or if they're not, they're involved in some of the other 4 initiatives that I didn't talk about today. We have a lot of partners, including staff from the Mid-Atlantic, South Atlantic Commission, and NOAA, as well as many academic partners who serve on our oversight teams. We are, as I noted, some of you are participating in our workshop. And then we have a lot of contract support from Brett Weedoff at the Farnan Group, working with Linker Corporation staff and others at Farnan. University of Massachusetts Dartmouth is doing the portfolio work. That's Dr. Lauren Brewster and Connor Casino. We have Dr. Chris Haig at Monmouth University. He's helped, he's been developing species distribution models. Those will be used for the portfolio work to understand species shifts and for ecosystem component work that I didn't talk about. And some of that kind of modernizing our own data approaches and our process is being supported by Angelia Miller, who's the Maris Club. So I'm happy to take questions about these as we wrap up, or if you have questions about our IRA initiatives overall, I can either answer them or put in touch with the right person. So reach out. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Aaron Kornbluth. I'm leading the project in the South Atlantic. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Michelle and Brandon, for teeing things up so nicely. I'm going to try to keep things moving along quickly. Mr. Chair, Dr. Moore, and Council, thanks for having us here. It's really great to be collaborating with you all and with the plan oversight team and folks on your council and in New England and at ASMFC and NOAA Fisheries. We are also collaborating on the South Atlantic governance project very closely with folks in the Gulf. Folks like Deirdre Bolke are just finishing up some work there, and so it's great to be collaborating across boundaries. Next slide, please. So we come from a team, Percy and I, whom I think some of you in the room might know as former Pew charitable trust staff. We are no longer acting in that capacity. We are contractors out here in our own right. I've worked with many of you in the past. The last time I saw many of you, I was not wearing glasses. That's what happens over time. The third leg to our stool is Steve Poland, who unfortunately could not be here. He is a former South Atlantic Council member, North Carolina DMF staffer, and NOAA Fisheries staffer. He regrets not being able to be here to meet you all, but sends his regards. Next slide, please. To be honest, we're going to try to breeze through this presentation because so much of what we're doing in the South Atlantic under the IRA governance project is similar to what you just heard Brandon and Michelle talk about. We're collaborating with them very closely, trying to share ideas, connections, so on and so forth. Our goals are very similar to the goals of the Mid-Atlantic's governance project. We're trying to understand what are the pain points in the South Atlantic, what are some opportunities to improve processes. To this point, having started this project in September, we have done some extremely thorough deep dives into looking at council processes. We've combed through every standard operating procedure in the South Atlantic, all of the materials that kind of provide guidance on how processes and procedures and public engagement work. And we've turned around a pretty comprehensive analysis of how that process works, and in some cases how it doesn't in the South Atlantic. I'm thinking over time that we'll be able to share some of those outcomes once the South Atlantic Council and staff have had a chance to review that work. We're also in the process of trying to look outward beyond the jurisdiction of the South Atlantic Council to places like the Mid-Atlantic, where things are, approached in a different way. We're trying to beg, borrow, and steal the best lessons learned and experiences and tools from other places. And we're doing a very broad search across all 8 regional councils, NOAA fisheries, and we're even looking into the international arena at some of the regional fishery management organizations, EU Common Fisheries Policy work, so on and so forth, to figure out what types of governance processes, structures, engagement are working well and why. Next slide, please. To do this, again, we're doing a fair amount of desktop research and analysis. We're conducting interviews with folks. We've already had some great conversations with folks affiliated with the Mid-Atlantic. A number of you around the room, I think, are already teed up to have some great interviews to follow. Percy's going to talk a little bit about some of the cross-council, cross-ASMFC and NIMS, NOAA fisheries engagement and case studies that we're looking into to try to do that. I will also note that we're relying on the use of artificial intelligence to comb through volumes and volumes of information. We're also working on building tools for the South Atlantic Council developed with the help of AI and enhanced internally by AI. For example, to allow council members, council staff, and others to be able to do rapid assessments of past council meetings and ideas and actions. For example, we've compiled every single council meeting transcript going back into the late 80s for the South Atlantic Council, and now with all of that living in a single centralized database, it will allow folks to do very simple natural language queries to ask questions like, has anybody ever had idea X, Y, or Z? If so, when was it? Who was it? What were the outcomes of it? Was there a vote on it, or did it die on the vine? So I think we're building some really potentially useful tools for the South Atlantic Council. We will be coordinating very closely with folks at the Mid, New England, and elsewhere as we develop those tools to try to use the best available information and make these tools more broadly applicable. Next slide. So we're doing these really deep dives into what processes the council internally has historically used, as well as what external public engagement kind of defines their work. We're trying to understand how to streamline decision making, develop more efficient procedures and processes, improve timelines, and better allocate resources. In all of my years engaging in fisheries management across the U.S., I know and I can very well appreciate just how hard staff and council members work on this stuff. And I think you all would be well served by having some of these processes streamlined, enhanced, simplified, clarified, and frankly, automated. Next slide. And with that, I'll turn it over to Percy, who's leading our cross-body research and coordination.
Hey, y'all. Most of you knew me before glasses as well, so 5 years later. So the way the MSA is structured really makes a very siloed process for purposes of managing fisheries. As we've come into more of the climate change scenario planning, and even frankly, well before that, when we weren't really paying attention, the fish don't really care about our arbitrary jurisdictional boundaries. So working across lines is becoming more and more important. And the other problem with the MSA is it doesn't really give us a whole lot of direction on how to do that either. However, within the boundaries of what it outlines, there's plenty of voluntary work that councils can do in order to enhance cross-council management and predict things that before they happen a little bit more than reacting on our heels. We're using blue line tilefish as the obvious and clear canary in the coal mine, as when it crossed the boundaries from the South Atlantic into the mid, and the mid had to react on the fly and do emergency actions. But ideally, the way we would deal with something like that is to be a little bit more proactive, to be ready for it before it happens, and to sort of see the matrix when species are cross-jurisdictional, how it's managed by one particular council or both councils together, and when that would happen in that, like whether or not it would be one council, two councils together, and how that would be divided up. It also seems like with the blue line tilefish, that there's been a really good result in having the joint SSC work, and we're looking into how that's worked out and whether or not there are improvements that can be made there, or if that's something that can be duplicated in other scenarios. Next slide, please. So also for better stakeholder engagement, Aaron talked a little bit about the AI that we've been doing, him in particular. He's very savvy in this. And part of the ability to search the databases would include stakeholder comments and ways to take all that information. And there's just an extensive amount of it, and take all of it, condense it down to some fairly clear bullet points and areas of focus where stakeholders are most likely to, or where the stakeholders have been commenting on what their positions are on it, how many people have that particular position, and find ways to really consolidate it, which could help with staff time and staff focus. And it can also, in some ways, make it easier to incorporate stakeholder perspectives into management processes. Next slide, please. And so long-term adaptive governance, this is also connected to what I was talking about before with cross-council management, but also like how individual councils can react to new information on the fly, and like find shorter processes for how you would change one specific smaller part of a management process, and what would take longer versus shorter, and how you react to small changes in information on a fairly quick time frame. We are also working with Sarah Geiches, who's doing the ecosystems-based evaluation of our process, and we will be working with her on how to be more reactive in real time to real changes in jurisdictional management. Next slide, please. So the project timeline, I can be really quick on this. We're already through months 1 through 3. This is us really sort of digging in on what needs to be focused on, how we need to focus our attention and our time, where the pain points really are, and where we can spend our time best to figure out what needs to happen in order to streamline processes. So we're now in months 4 through 12, which is more of a deep dive into stakeholder engagement, talking to council members, talking to AP members, talking to committees, talking cross councils with, and to the commission at the ASMFC, NOAA fisheries, and the SSCs, and figure out with all of that information and all those individualized interviews and focus groups, we can bring all that information together. Months 3 through 16 will be more of the consolidation of all that information and trying to come up with very clear ways to produce that and present it to the council so that it's very palatable and digestible. And months 7 through 19 is how it will be actionable. So we can take all that information and kind of create very clear, straightforward action items out of that so that the council can streamline both its internal process and its ability to communicate cross-jurisdictional boundaries. Next slide. That's it. So thank you guys for having us. It's really, really great to see everybody again. It's been a while. So.
All right, so I just have one more slide. Sorry we ran a little long, but I think this is an important topic. There's lots happening, as you can see, in regards to these IRA projects, and I think have a lot of potential for some pretty important outcomes for all three councils and the commission at the end of all of this. So this was really just to inform you about the projects today. There's no decisions. If you certainly have any questions about the projects, happy to take any, but it's also to give folks a heads up. If you haven't been contacted already, some of you probably already have, but if not, you will likely be contacted at some point in 2026 for an interview, complete a questionnaire, participate in a workshop. So this is your warning, or if you're interested in any of it, certainly feel free to reach out and let us know that you want to participate in any of these processes. So council members, advisory panel members, SSE members, staff, everybody's going to be engaged in this. The coordination group's going to continue to track all of these projects. And again, if you have any questions about any of them, feel free to reach out to Kylie and myself or any of the other staff leads on the projects. And thanks, Mr. Chair, and we'll take any questions if there are any.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for moving through all of that so quickly. As Brandon mentioned, I think if you have deeper interest in any of these particular projects or in getting involved or connecting people to us, please reach out to either Brandon or Kylie or Chris or I. And maybe some more in-depth questions can happen that way as well, but I will look to the council right now if there are any questions. And if somebody could help me online, I don't have the online up right now. So.
Who saw him? We're good.
Maybe Michelle.
Steve. We'll have it open. Steve, you see
Okay,
online?
not seeing any hands, man. So once again, thank you all for that. I much appreciated. Okay, with that, we will move into our next agenda item, which is the business session. And we are going to go to committee reports and start with Paul and the SSC report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I know I can't see you, but I know that many of you will be disappointed that I have no formal presentation today. But instead, I would like to update you on some of the SSC's plans between now and March. Our objective, of course, is to always get better and to improve the quality of advice to you. And to that end, one of the big looming challenges, of course, is the decreased frequency and different types of assessments that we're likely to see over the next few years. So we will be reviewing some of the decisions that we made this year, primarily with the focus on whether they have generality and that they might be applicable to future decisions. And so we have a number of subgroups planned, working group meetings planned between now and March, and I'll be reporting to you at the next meeting in terms of our progress. I would just like to end with a thank you to all of you on the council, particularly for listening to my diddly dull presentations over the course of the year. And a special thanks to our council staff. They're world class, and I'd like to give a special shout out to Brandon Muffley, who keeps things organized and keeps our focused and does a lot of the planning for successful meetings. And so, and then finally, just wish everybody a happy holiday season, the best in the new year. And I and the rest of the SSC look forward to working with you next year. Thank you very much. Happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Oh, sorry. There we go. Thank you, Paul. Any questions for Paul? Not seeing any. Okay. we will move on, and we're going to go to the executive director's report. So I'll turn it over to Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. I have a number of items behind the tab that I'm going to go over relatively quickly. Mary's going to help me by keeping track by having some slides for you to look at as well. If you take a look at the tab, the first item behind the tab is our usual item, which is the meeting topics for the year. Obviously, this is our last meeting for the year. One of the things I forgot to tell everyone earlier in the week is that we didn't have the Rick C. Savage Award, not because we didn't find somebody to give the award to, but because the individual that was getting the award couldn't be here at the meeting. So, we had our best laid plans. We're basically, let's get this award done in the year that the award is for. But unfortunately, the individual couldn't be here. So that award will be given to him in April, hopefully. Speaking of April and next year in general, there is the next items behind the tab, which are the locations for our 2026 and 2027 meetings. Those are the dates for the meetings. Those dates will not change. We're not going to have any problems with our South Atlantic partners or our New England partners relative to meeting overlap. So you can take a look at those. Remember, we made a decision to have the first meeting of the year, February, a virtual meeting. So we're going to continue to do that. We will continue to do that until I hear from folks that, in fact, they don't want to do that anymore. So it really works for us in terms of efficiencies, cost reductions. Typically, our February meetings are not heavy, with a lot of council action. Typically, they involve presentations and basically information transfer. So that's what I expect for this February. I don't have any items yet for that particular meeting, but we will have a meeting. We will have items for that meeting. It's likely to be most probably a day and a half. And I may, basically arrange it so that we just have like 3/4 of a day for 2 days or something like that. So we'll see. So stay tuned for that. Also, you can take a look and see that, in fact, for the next couple of years, we're meeting in a couple of new locations. So that'll be interesting. For folks that are interested, we'll be back in DC in August of 27. So you can look forward to coming back then. The next items beyond the tabs are status documents for completed or ongoing actions, typical documents that you see and that we update for every meeting. They're good reference documents, give you the details of the what and the wheres relative to our amendments and frameworks and what we're currently working on. There's also the next couple items are similar documents detailing timelines, then status of current and upcoming specifications. Several of those we discussed this week, and certainly I'm not going to go over that in detail. I wanted to make you aware again of this press release, which is the next item behind the tab. You've seen it, I hope. This is the Atlantic Council solicits public input on essential fish habitat amendment press release, indicating that we will hold 5 public hearings to get public input on that particular document. We already held a couple. According to Jessica, there were about a dozen or so folks in each one of those webinars. So we do have public interest. We do have folks that are participating in those webinars. We have a couple more scheduled for early in the year to collect additional public input. We do have an in-person hearing scheduled for the ASMSC meeting in February. And Joe Grist will be the hearing officer at that meeting. And I want to thank Joe and Michelle Duvall for being the hearing officers for these meetings. So like I said, we've already had a couple. If anyone asks you or is interested, we're taking written comments on the document until February 11th of next year. One of the other things too I want to point out, there are a couple of videos associated with this amendment. Take a look at those. If you don't know what I'm talking about, we can make sure that those links, we send those links around again. I think they're excellent and well done and certainly support the action. The next item is a document that you probably didn't anticipate, or maybe you did. It's entitled Roles, Responsibilities, and Composition of the Scientific and Statistical Committee. So this is a document, good reference document. I asked Brandon to put this together for us to detail the roles and responsibilities of our SSC, including how their role intersects with the role of the council, the other advisory bodies that we're involved with, like the monitoring committee, advisory panels. This is very similar to the document that I asked for earlier in the year that detailed the roles and responsibilities of the monitoring committee. So I think personally, I think the document is well done. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, please do. Hopefully it addresses a number of the issues that were raised during the August council meeting. So remember we had that sort of, wasn't confusing, it was just a somewhat complicated conversation about what the SSC could do, what the monitoring committees could do, and we went back and forth on a number of those topics. So hopefully it answers those questions, and hopefully it answers any questions you might have about how the SSC works. So certainly, if you have any questions about that, we could address those today. The next couple items are letters that talk about something that we talked about yesterday. It's a letter to Dan. The first one is a letter to Dan McCurran, who's the director of the Mass Division of Marine Fisheries, who is here with us this week, part of the ASMSC board. It's from Alan Curl regarding an ongoing closure of that Great South Channel Habitat Management Area on Nantucket Shoals. So this is that surf clam issue that we discussed relative to our 2026 implementation plan. Dan responded to that letter. Those letters were part of the conversation that occurred at the New England Council relative to priorities. And as I said yesterday, they are going to be working on this particular topic. In spring, the New England Habitat Committee will meet to discuss an EFH designation framework, which will include the discussions about work plans and timelines to conduct the review evaluation of that HMA. So again, this is something we talked about yesterday. And I'll stop there, Mr. Chairman, to see if there's any questions before I move on.
All right, very good. Questions for Chris? Jim Gilmore?
Just quickly, Chris, the white paper that does the SSC, whatever, is that something that's applicable to all the councils, or are the unique parts of the Mid-Atlantic?
So there's parts of it that would apply to all the councils, right? So there's in Magnuson, there's reference to the SSC and how SSCs are supposed to work, but there's also parts of it that apply specifically to how the Mid-Atlantic Council SSC works, and specifically in respect to how it works with monitoring committees, advisory committees in the council. So again, yeah, good document, excellent document. So take a look at it if you haven't seen it. Other questions?
Not seeing any other hands. Yeah, Chris, I mean, I think that along with what was already put together on the role of the monitoring committees is something that'll probably be a part of our future discussions. Now that we ask NIMS to work on, some of the language for the monitoring committee. I don't think that's, as Mike pointed out, I think that's a helpful quick fix to give some flexibility, but I don't think it's the end of that discussion. So any other questions on this part?
So thank you. The next item behind the tab is the Protected Resources newsletter that Hayden puts together for us for each council meeting. The newsletter discusses the major protected resource issues that we dealt with in 2025. There's three main topics that Hayden identified, including the North Atlantic right whale topic, on-demand ropeless fishing gear, and the alternative gear marking framework. So, if you're not familiar with any of those topics, certainly we could talk about those. We expect that those will be the same major topics for next year as well. The Atlantic Large Whale Take Reduction Team plans to meet in 2026 to develop proposed modifications to the Atlantic Large Whale Take Reduction Plan. Also, NOAA Fisheries intends to issue a request for information on alternative gear marking, which will inform the council's consideration of the alternative gear marking framework. There's the rest of the newsletter touches on a variety of topics. Turtles, a recent study on sea turtle vessel strike injuries along the Atlantic and Gulf Coast is discussed there, and points out that most stranded sea turtles with vessel strike injuries were observed in Florida and Texas. And there are hot spots of strandings with vessel strike injuries across the study area, including certain locations in the Mid-Atlantic. I'm starting to hear, as an aside, and not included in the newsletter, I'm starting to hear some background noise on TEDs that I need to figure out. Hayden has to help me figure out. I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but there's some conversations that relate to TEDs and I'll provide more specifics as we get them. So TEDs are turtle excluder devices for folks that aren't aware. Also, Hayden in our newsletter points out that NIMS and Fish and Wildlife Service have jointly proposed 2 rules that would revise certain Endangered Species Act regulations, specifically those related to listing and critical habitat and interagency cooperation. That there's a 30-day comment period associated with that. Comments are due by December 21. Next item behind the tab, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on. Again, a reference document that details our Inflation Reduction Act projects, the funding and the status update. Remember that we have our staff has put together some fact sheets associated with each one of those projects that you can find on our website. And I'm going to move on to the next item. This is the update on wind energy developments that Julia provides to us at each meeting. A couple points to consider. Take a look at the entire document, just put some highlights. One thing it's included in the report or in the update is that news outlets have reported that the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health has been directed to investigate the impacts of offshore wind energy development on fisheries. So there's no official information that's available, so we're not exactly sure what this is about, but certainly we'll provide additional information as we get it. There is a continued reduction in funding for all things related to wind energy from the federal administration. This includes funding for a study that was led by Coonamessett Farm, which would evaluated the impacts of wind energy development on commercial fish species and benthic habitats. There's also been some news about the South Coast Wind and leasing light wind canceling. I'm sorry. There's also been news about South Coast Wind and Leading Light Wind canceling their power purchase agreements with the state of Rhode Island and New Jersey. Doesn't mean those projects are gone, but because they could still apply for future state energy solicitations. NOAA also announced a forthcoming technical memo on fish kills at Seaval and Revolution Wind. Remember, we had a presentation on that in last October. And once that memo becomes available, we'll share that. There's also info in the memo about a 2026 workshop on wind, wildlife, and fisheries. Let's see what else. Oh, there's also the project list has been revamped so they can look at ongoing construction of operations based on their notices to mariners. And not in the memo, but news is that a federal judge vacated the Trump administration's day 1 executive order, which initiated a comprehensive review of wind projects and halted all federal approvals of anything related to wind until that review was complete. The judge ruled the executive order was arbitrary and capricious, contrary to law. This would mean, as we understand it, the federal agencies can no longer use that executive order as justification for their pause of all things wind. And the administration can appeal this finding. I see that John has some comments, given that this is a legal issue. I'll stop there. I'm trying to see if there's anything else. I think that's it for the wind memo. John?
Thanks, Chris. I just wanted to make a slight correction. The court decision was very careful to make a distinction between the executive order and the agency's actions implementing the executive order, because the Administrative Procedure Act is applicable to agencies as opposed to the president. So I just wanted to make that clarification, because it is an important point that the court makes.
Agreed. That's why I should never pretend to be a lawyer. Other comments before I go on? Questions? Bless you. So there's also a couple supplements. One includes one of them is a request for nominations to the Council Scientific and Statistical Committee. We have a couple vacancies, and we'll be considering those vacancies early in 2026. So stay tuned. Also, there is a memo from Hannah to me indicating that the Northeast Trawl Advisory Committee panel has 2 stakeholder vacancies on the panel. We solicited applications for the position in November, and the co-chairs of NTAP have recommended Wes Townsend and John Mannix to fill those 2 vacancies. The way it works is that we bring that to the council and ask for approval by the council for those 2 vacancies. If you don't know those individuals, we have some short bios included in the memo, so hopefully you had a chance to look at those. And what I'd like to do, Mr. Chair, is just basically go to the council at this point and see if folks agree with those nominations.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess assuming everyone had a chance to look at bios, if they don't know the individuals already, I think I would just look to see if there's any objections to that. Okay, Chris, not seeing any.
So with no objections, those 2 individuals will be notified that in fact they are going to fill those vacancies. A couple other items in supplemental. This is fishery industry input needed for the annual State of the Ecosystem Report. This is a request that we put out. Hopefully that folks had a chance to see it, and we'll respond to that in kind. And then there's that reference to the FH videos in terms of the link if you're interested in that. And with that, the only other thing I have is this. So thanks everyone for their participation in the annual council photo. Looks like a very happy group, and what an excellent picture. Really did come out well. So thanks for that, and happy holidays to everyone. Enjoy your time off if you're taking time off. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll take any questions that folks have relative to anything that I've talked about this morning.
Very good. Thank you so much, Chris. Questions for Chris on any of that? Okay. Not seeing any, Chris. Thank you again. And we'll go on to the organization reports. And as always, we'll start off with GARFO. So I'll turn to Mike Pentney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brought this up pretty quickly. So just a few items to note. On October 3rd, right after the shutdown started, we were able to publish a rule in the FR extending emergency measures for the Northeast groundfish fishery, because the emergency that we had been operating under from May 1st to that point was due to expire in late October, and so we rushed to get something out, anticipating that the shutdown might not end before that emergency rule expired. So we were fortunate to be able to do that. That temporary rule will continue to allow the groundfish fishery to operate through the end of their fishing year on April 30th. Meanwhile, we are also working to get Fair Market Adjustment 69 to the FMP, which is the normal annual kind of specifications and adjustment rule. We finally published a proposed rule for that on December 8th. And even though it's very late in the fishing year, we're hoping to still finalize that rule and get it in place before the end of the fishing year. The comment period on that proposed rule closes on January 7th, and then we'll be working, as I said, to finalize that. On November 10th, right after we got back from the shutdown, we closed the blue line tilefish commercial fishery through the end of the calendar year. And that was triggered because the blue line tilefish commercial landings exceeded 100% of their total allowable landings. We had earlier in the year reduced the commercial possession limit in order to slow landings, but they did reach the 100% of the TAL in late October. On December 9th, a little bit late this year, we published the proposed rule for the summer flounder, scup, sea bass, and bluefish 2026 specifications and projected 2027 specifications. So those are all proposed consistent with the decisions and recommendations of the council and the board. Of note, the proposed rule includes bluefish. We combined those this year in the hopes of streamlining things and making them a little bit more efficient. I'm not sure that actually worked out, but there we are. The comment period on the proposed rule closes on Christmas Eve. So we are not going to make our staff work over Christmas. to finalize that rule. So don't expect to see the final rule before the end of the calendar year when we normally publish it. But we would expect or hope to see it in early to mid-January. All the state directors should have the updated information in terms of our landings calculations so that you're aware of any potential overages that will be carried forward into the 2026 fishing year. On December 11th, we published a final rule implementing the 2025 herring specifications. The herring fishing year ends on the 31st, so very timely to publish the annual specifications 3 weeks before the end of the fishing year. But hey, we got it done. We're working on a notice action that will actually confirm the 2026 specifications because those were part of the rule, but we have to actually confirm them before they're effective on January 1st. Last thing to note, and I think I mentioned this at the October meeting, in July, we received a petition from the Center for Biological Diversity to list cusk as a threatened or endangered species under the Endangered Species Act. This is mostly a New England issue, but it requests that we designate critical habitat for the species as well. We are reviewing that petition pursuant to Section 4 of the ESA. It will determine whether the petition presents substantial scientific or commercial information suggesting that the petition may be warranted. If we conclude that it may be warranted, we'll actually then at that point publish what we call a positive 90-day finding to solicit additional information from the public and the states and others interested parties for information that we would consider in a status review. A positive 90-day finding is not an indication that we think the species should be listed. It just is an indication that we think there may be merit to the proposal, and it suggests a full status review is warranted. If we conclude that there's not sufficient information in the petition, then it would be a negative 90-day finding, and that's the end of the process. So that's all I have. I'll take any questions if there are.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Mike? Chris?
I apologize, Mike, if you said this, but where are we with the surf climb and ocean quahog amendment? Is that moving through the system?
It's moving through the system. The next step would be for us to publish a notice of availability for the amendment, which is focused on the approval or disapproval of the amendment. I believe, I think people are aware that we're planning to hold the rulemaking, the proposed and final rulemaking, until we are able to more definitively define what the monitoring program would look like. So we're working with industry on exempted fishing permits, and they're working at different looking at different opportunities and different options for shipboard and processor-based monitoring to segregate and track the landings of mixed trips of surf clams and quahogs. So hopefully we'll see the NOAA soon, and then we'll continue to work on the proposed rule.
Okay, Mike, I don't see any other questions. I did want to note, I mean, I think it's obvious to the council and folks listening that the Federal Register is an important cog to keep things moving at this level, but at the state level as well. I know, for New Jersey and probably a lot of other states, it's our state authority is tied to what happens through federal plans and federal management, and so the timeliness of that means a lot. But thank you for, you and your staff for always pushing to get that stuff through. We do? Okay. Go ahead, Rich.
Thank you, Mike. Is there any update on the 90-day finding for horseshoe crab? Thank you.
Yeah, I think hopefully everybody realizes that 90 days should always be seen as in air quotes, because we received the petition for horseshoe crab I think in late 2023, and then there was another one that was in early 2024, and we're still working on the 90-day finding. But I hope that we'll see that early in the next calendar year.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the Northeast Fisheries Science Center. I believe Nicole's going to handle that. And if you wouldn't mind giving an introduction. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. I am Nicole Cabana. I'm the Deputy Director at the Northeast Fisheries Science Center. I'm based in Woods Hole, and John Hare wasn't able to attend this week. He sends his regrets, and he is online and has been all week. I'll quickly introduce myself. Before becoming the Deputy Director of the Northeast Fisheries Science Center, I was a NOAA Corps officer. I did that for 20 years. I retired in 2020. I have a strong operational background from that career. I started as a seagoing officer and I moved into aviation. I was a pilot of NOAA research aircraft for most of my career, but I have a lot of sea time as well. And I think that's relevant because we do a lot of operations at the Northeast Fisheries Science Center, and that's a lot of what my updates are going to be on today. So the last few months have been different, particularly with the government shutdown, which furloughed most of our employees. But we still got a lot done, and we carried out a lot of the critical work that we normally had scheduled for that time frame. John and I are both very proud of the work that we were able to accomplish, and we weren't able to do everything, but we did as much as we could within the constraints that were imposed by the shutdown. So first, I'll talk about our surveys. We were successful in running all of our surveys during the shutdown, and that's very different from past shutdowns where operations were really constrained. We did our bottom trawl survey. This year we had 4 legs of our bottom trawl survey. It's normally a 3-leg survey, but due to the shutdown and some delays, ship maintenance issues, gear issues, we weren't able to achieve as much as we wanted in the 3 legs, and so we successfully got days added in December. And because of that, we were able to complete 68% of our planned stations, and we sampled 100% of the survey footprint with at least 1 station in all strata. For the spring, we plan to do the bottom trawl survey on the NOAA ship Pisces, and Pisces has a wet lab overhaul that's anticipated this winter to prepare it for taking on the bottom trawl survey in the spring. That seems to be on track. We completed our ecosystem monitoring survey, the EcoMon survey. That sailed from October 18th to November 7th, and we completed 57% of our planned stations. Again, that was during the government shutdown. And the Gulf of Maine bottom longline survey sailed aboard the fishing vessel Mary Elizabeth and the Tenacious II. That survey was completed on November 21st. We completed 100% of our planned stations, and we used a new electronic data collection system that should improve efficiency. I want to extend a special thanks to all of our scientists and contractors and OMAO officers and our NOAA Corps officer assigned to the Northeast Fisheries Science Center, Mike Ball, who worked full-time through the government shutdown. I can tell you it's not easy being at sea ever, and it's especially hard when most of the support system that you're accustomed to is not present. Next, I'm going to talk about the Northeast Trawl Advisory Panel. The next panel meeting is January 22nd in the Mid-Atlantic. The panel is working hard on the regional industry-based trawl survey. VIMS was selected in mid-September to conduct a pilot survey. The original plan was to sail in November, but that was impacted by the government shutdown. Specifically, it affected our ability to get permits and the uncertainty around the staff that were needed. So the pilot survey is now expected to go in the spring. And we will be sharing a revised schedule of planning meetings. That'll be discussed with the working group and then shared after that meeting. For our cooperative research, we have our 2026 Cooperative Research Summit scheduled for February 26th. It'll be in Riverhead, New York. Registration is closed because we filled capacity, and we're looking forward to the event. Our observer program, on October 1st, the biological port sampling program moved into the Northeast Fisheries Science Center Observer Program. That's a big move. It was made more complicated with the government shutdown. But the program was able to be supported throughout the shutdown by intermittent federal staff and affiliates. And we expected some bumps along the way with the start of that program. We've had a few bumps, but we feel like we're doing a good job and we'll continue to build efficiencies throughout the year. The rest of the Observer program is on track with coverage targets for the Northeast Fisheries Observer Program, NEFOP, with our at-sea monitoring and with our industry-funded scout monitoring program. For assessment updates, our September management track completed with expedited turnaround of the peer review panel report. We've had a lot of hard work by our population dynamics branch to complete and deliver assessment products early in advance of the shutdown, with the goal of minimizing the impacts and ensuring that management activities could continue without the government staff available. This included substantial briefing of council staff to prepare them to present materials in place of our population dynamics branch staff. And thank you very much to the council staff who did a great job in carrying that work forward. We also had some intense work by several of our population dynamics branch staff immediately upon our return to provide additional analyses and products to support the ongoing management work. Moving on to right whales, our right whale surveys also continued during the shutdown by both the Northeast Fisheries Science Center and collaborators. We had aerial surveys going in the Mid-Atlantic, New England, and Canada. And we also conducted an acoustic survey sensor retrieval cruise in New England, as well as continued monitoring acoustic receivers for the presence of right whales. And again, I want to thank all of our Science Center staff and partners who allowed that work to continue. Of note, when our team was in Canada, we identified 70 right whales in the Gulf of St. Lawrence in October. So still a significant portion of the population up north late in the season. The winter calving season has begun. Surveys have begun in the southeast region, and at least 6 right whales have been spotted along the North Carolina coast. For on-demand gear, the gear research team presented 5 pre-recorded presentations at the Ropeless Consortium in October. They were virtual because of the shutdown. Our affiliate staff were able to attend in person. We're also preparing for the 4th experimental fishery in the Atlantic large whale take reduction plan, the lobster fisheries restricted areas, to start on February 1st, 26. To give an update on our marine energy development branch, we have a survey mitigation program. This is a tech memo that's in the final stages of editing prior to release for comments. We have multiple developers considering supporting this project to meet their survey mitigation conditions in their COP approvals. The ecosystem-based fisheries management work, we're working with the New England Fishery Management Council and Mid-Atlantic Fishery Management Council to ensure that our state of the ecosystem and socioeconomic profiles are well integrated with the NEFMC risk policy and the Mid-Atlantic Fishery Management Council risk assessment to support the SSC and council decision-making. The planning for the state of the ecosystem reports in spring 2026 is on schedule. We're getting some indications it may not contain the full 2025 data due to the disruptions to the data streams. And then lastly, a note on our budget. We're under a continuing resolution until the end of January. We have received our fund allocation, and hopefully Congress will take action so that we can avoid another shutdown at the end of January. That's all I've got. Happy to take questions.
Questions for Nicole? Bobby?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, real quick, you skipped over, or if you did, I didn't hear it. What was the outcome of the mass DMF in Maine, New Hampshire surveys?
Oh, I don't know those off the top of my head. We'll see if John Hare can answer.
Thanks for the question. They completed, I don't know the percent at their completion rate, but that's something we can begin tracking. That's a good idea. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. One more hand I see right now, Michelle Duval.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Nicole. Nicole, remind me again. So I know the spring bottom trawl survey, as you mentioned, will be on the Pisces. Will the fall bottom trawl survey also be on the Pisces, or will the Bigelow refit be done by then? I just can't remember. Thanks.
I'm also not sure. Sorry. John, do you know?
Yeah, so the spring on Pisces is it's just for the spring, and then fall we'll be back on Bigelow. This is not the midlife refit of Bigelow. Midlife refit of Bigelow is funded, but currently not scheduled. At this point in time, we're expecting, maybe late FY27, FY28. The Dyson, which is the Bigelow's sister ship on the West Coast, is going to enter its midlife refit first. And then when that is done, then Bigelow will be second. Dyson has not yet gone in for its midlife refit. So we're still, at least 24 to 36 months, 48 months away from Bigelow going into its refit. The intent of having Pisces do spring bottom trawl survey now is to ensure that Pisces is available to do bottom trawl when Bigelow is in its midlife refit. And this also then gives us, an immediate contingency if something catastrophic happens to Bigelow, like what happened in sort of I think it was 2018, I don't remember, but Bigelow will be back for the fall bottom trawl survey to answer your question directly.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands. So thank you, Nicole, for the presentation and for being here this week. And thanks, John, for all your participation this week. And sorry we didn't get to see you. I do want to do a quick check-in with Counsel to see if anyone needs to check out. So we've got just a couple more reports, but we do also have at least one item of new business coming before us. I see a lot of bags in the room. I'm interested if folks are ready to push through and get through this, or if we need to take a quick break. All right, any objection to pushing through? Not seeing any. Fantastic. Okay, so next up, Office of General Counsel, and I'll turn it over to John Almeida.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to start with the Cape Cod Charter Boat Association, and I'm going to violate Mike Luisi's rule. This is a striped bass case. This was filed in the district court for the District of the District of Columbia. This case attempted to set aside a 2024 Commission striped bass addendum, and it was filed against the Commission, all of the states in the Commission, and NIFS. In November 14th, the court dismissed the case, ruling that the plaintiffs lacked standing to bring the lawsuit. This week, we learned that the plaintiffs have filed a notice of appeal to the DC Circuit. That was just filed, so we don't have a briefing schedule yet. The next case I'm going to report on is the Relentless case. You may recall this as the companion case to Loper Bright that also challenged the industry-funded monitoring fishery out of the New England Council. This was originally brought in the District of Rhode Island, and after the Supreme Court's ruling, the case was remanded back down to that district court, where the parties briefed the legal issues about industry-funded monitoring and the Magnuson-Stevens Act in a post-Loper Bright world where the Chevron doctrine had been overruled. The district court ruled in favor of NIFS, where the court agreed with NIFS that Magnuson authorizes industry-funded funded monitoring program that was at issue in the case. The plaintiffs then filed a notice of appeal to the First Circuit, and the briefing is going to unfold this winter. The plaintiffs' appellant's opening brief will be due in January. And the last case I'm going to report on is the New England Fishermen's Stewardship Association case. You may recall this is a challenge to the New England Council's Groundfish Framework 65, filed in the District of Maine. And like the Lofstad case we litigated earlier, this one is another challenge to the Council's authorities under the Appointments Clause of the U.S. Constitution. This case, I've reported on it before, and you may recall that the district court ruled very similarly to the Third Circuit decision in the Lofstad case, where the court found in the NEFSC case, the main case, two provisions of the Magnuson-Stevens Act that would provide the councils with the ability to prevent the Secretary of Commerce from acting without council approval. Those provisions would run afoul of the Appointments Clause. And so like the Lofstad case, the Maine court severed those provisions from the statute. And by doing so found that the councils, there was no longer an Appointments Clause concern with regard to the councils. The case is currently up on appeal to the First Circuit. The briefing should be done by the end of this week. I think the last brief is due on Friday. And then we'll see if the court sets a date for oral argument after that. And that's all I have for this report. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Great, thanks. Questions for John? Not seeing any. Thanks again, John. Okay, next up, Office of Law Enforcement. Saw Caleb's name online, so we'll turn it over to Caleb Gilbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound good.
Awesome. Good morning, council members. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Caleb Gilbert. I'm the compliance liaison for the Northeast Division of NOAA Fisheries Office of Law Enforcement. Yeah, I'm sorry I can't be there today. I'm hoping travel restrictions lift by the time of the April meeting. So hopefully I can see folks in person in April. But a couple details to share with the council today. We at OLE are very grateful the shutdown ended. For us, it was largely business as usual. For those unaware, all Office of Law Enforcement staff were listed as accepted or essential in the last shutdown, and it's most likely all OLE staff will be categorized similarly in any future shutdowns should they occur. Next, I'll mention that we're in the process of updating our fiscal year 2026 regional priorities. Hopefully I'll be able to provide an update on those priorities to the council at the February webinar. Our enforcement of, I'll just say now, our enforcement of all the laws in our portfolio will continue, and we will also continue to prioritize enforcement of our domestic fisheries laws. And I think that gets at one question that came up yesterday related to Office of Law Enforcement, capacity related to enhancing our enforcement efforts in the recreational blue line tilefish fishery. I thought Mike's response to that question was appropriate. So thanks, Mike. I'm happy to try to add to that if anyone wants to inquire further with me. I'll add too that we've recognized the interest the council has in enforcement of the rec blue line tilefish fishery. As many of you I think know, we always include an update on rec blue line tilefish cases that have closed out since the last meeting in our organizational reports. I have two that I can report out on today. And I think this is a point I tried to make in the past, but we don't have and never had any truly rec tilefish dedicated patrols or enforcement. Enforcement of that fishery happens during our routine enforcement efforts, such as with the HMS fishery. I think folks recognize that the blue line tilefish and HMS fisheries are often prosecuted simultaneously. Now, I haven't pulled cumulative statistics over the last few years since I've reporting our rec blue line tilefish on the water enforcement efforts, but the vast majority have been conducted by our state partners in the Mid-Atlantic. We did close out a case with compliance assistance from a Office of Law Enforcement boarding last September on a boat in New Jersey with blue line tilefish possession and no permit. And similarly, we closed a case involving blue line tilefish possession with no permit with compliance assistance. That was from a Maryland state referral following a boarding their officers conducted last July. And again, if folks have questions about rec blue line tilefish enforcement, I'm happy to try to answer those. Next, I'll cover a little of our trade enforcement work since the August meeting, as we could not participate in the October council meeting. Our apologies for that. Unfortunately, council participation wasn't an accepted activity for us. So in FY 2025, OLE in the Northeast Division conducted a total of 92 trade monitoring patrols or operations. So that was between October 1st, 2024 and September 30th of this year. We conducted 12 so far in the current fiscal year since October 1st. One trade enforcement highlight I'll mention today, October 16th and 17th, two enforcement officers collaborated with New Jersey Fish and Wildlife State and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Food and Drug Administration, excuse me, and U.S. Customs Border Patrol federal enforcement partners on Operation Tuna Melt. Investigating officers collected 16 samples of frozen tuna on the first day at the Port Liberty container facility in New York, and 12 samples of frozen tuna the second day at a similar container facility in northern New Jersey. All samples were taken for species analysis using one of our rapid, high-precision portable DNA testing devices, and related investigations are ongoing. Moving on to our enforcement support of North Atlantic right whale conservation. On October 5th, our D2, our Southern Division, one of our D2 EOs alongside New Jersey JEA officers conducted an at-sea patrol of coastal waters off New Jersey up to 30 miles offshore, hauled 5 lobster trawls, and no Atlantic large whale take reduction plan violations were identified on that patrol. Regarding our related quarterly compliance metrics, I can report for quarter 3 of FY 2025. So between April 1st and June 30th of this year, OLE and state enforcement partners combined to conduct a total of 59 Atlantic large whale take reduction plan focused patrol days. As always, Maine Marine Patrol conducted the majority of these patrols, but in quarter 3, we documented patrols also conducted by Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Maryland, and New York state enforcement partners on Atlantic large whale take reduction plan regulations. That's in addition to the OLE contract platform vessel patrols that we conducted. So cumulatively in the third quarter, OLE and our enforcement partners collectively inspected trawls from 314 vessels on separate patrol-focused days. So we saw an 82% compliance rate. I'm still tabulating the take reduction plan compliance rate and patrol metrics for the fourth quarter, and should have that available to the council at the February meeting. I won't cover our work in speed rule enforcement related to our North Atlantic right whale conservation efforts, but if folks have questions about that, I'm happy to try to answer that. So moving on to our enforcement efforts in support of the Observer Program. In early October, a vessel on a squid trip off New York was updated to 5-minute ping rates in response to a report received for a vessel with a fire that had an observer on board. And the issue was fortunately resolved without further incident, and the 5-minute ping rate was turned off before the trip concluded. In addition, our Observer Program liaison special agent provided enforcement training to a new class of observers for the October 2025 at-sea monitor training. And he participated in the company observer support panel alongside a center and U.S. Coast Guard representatives. That I think happens routinely at all of those meetings. And our observer-related casework continues. The only thing I have to report is we closed an observer interference case in September after providing compliance assistance. The last highlight, one of the last highlights I thought might be worth mentioning to the council today is that on September 4th, 2 of our EOs traveled to Elizabeth City, Maryland at the U.S. Coast Guard D5 Air Station to discuss collaboration related to living marine resource patrols utilizing fixed and rotary wing patrols, rotary wing aircraft. Specific discussion involved joint U.S. Coast Guard D5 and OLE interest in utilizing U.S. Coast Guard aerial assets to identify IUU fishing vessels in the EEZ, enforcement of our North Atlantic right whale seasonal management area regulations, and to conduct patrols of the Lautenberg deep sea coral protection area. And on a related follow-up patrol, an EO patrolled the Lautenberg deep sea coral protection area on a C-130 out of the Air Station Elizabeth City on October 22nd. The targets of that patrol were draggers transiting the area with gear out, as well as swordfish vessels participating in an ongoing tournament with the intent to review landing reports later. That October 22nd patrol was one of 2 air patrols on board U.S. Coast Guard assets our enforcement officers have participated in so far in FY 2026. The other was out of U.S. Coast Guard Station Cape Cod, patrolling within the D1 or more Northern Division AOR. We only patrolled or participated in 1 air patrol all year in FY 2025. And so this is the last detail I'll mention today, our land and sea patrol totals for FY 2025. So since October 1st, 2024 through September 30th of this year, so FY 2025 land patrol total included 309 patrols. We've conducted a total of 65 since October 1 of this year in this current fiscal year. And for at-sea patrols, we conducted 111 in FY 2025 and 16 so far this year. And those land and at-sea patrols stats include patrols on all of our domestic fisheries law enforcement priorities, such as HMS, Scallop, Land Large Whale Take Reduction Plan, et cetera. And that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman. I'm more than happy to take any questions, as I mentioned before.
Okay, thanks, Caleb, although now I'm wishing for a tuna melt. Questions for Caleb? Not seeing any hands. All right, well, thank you again.
My pleasure.
Next report is from U.S. Coast Guard, so I'll turn to Lieutenant Commander Mo. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the report from the East Coast Guard District for October 1st to November 30th. Sadly, we were only able to conduct 10 fisheries boardings during the period. Our efforts were greatly reduced due to the closure of the federal government. So all those boardings happened after the 14th of November once we opened everything back up again. We did not find any fisheries violations during those boardings. And the East District continues to execute our annual North Atlantic right whale operation called Op Right Speed, intended to educate mariners and enforce the ship strike reduction rule. The last month in November, we conducted 3 hail outs to vessels violating that speed restriction. Additionally, we continue to do Op Fin Finder, which targets HMS species off of North Carolina. Next meeting, I'll be able to have the results of how we did with that. And we also do Op Stars and Stripers, targeting vessels fishing for striped bass off of New Jersey through Virginia. All 10 of our boardings were recreational vessels, and for commercial fishing vessel efforts, during the period, we conducted 25 dockside exams and issued 17 decals. And there was 1 reported marine casualty involving a commercial fishing vessel on the 4th of October. Sector Maryland National Capital Region received a report from fishing vessel Little River that one of their crew member was experiencing shortness of breath. Sector Launch Station Ocean City, who got underway with EMS on board to meet the fishing vessel. Station transferred the patient to the small boat, who then transported them to shore where they were taken to a hospital for the ambulance. For outreach efforts, our dockside exams and decals were lower than usual due to the government shutdown for over half the period. Sector units continue outreach efforts, and we continue conducting commercial fishing vessel safety training for our units. Any questions? Thank you.
Questions for Josh? Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Josh, I'm curious about the vessels that were violated for those speed restrictions. Like, what happens? I mean, you guys found they violated the restriction, but is it like a warning, don't do that again, or?
We give them a verbal warning over the radio, and then we document it within our law enforcement database, and we share that information with NOAA for adjudication. Thanks.
Any other questions? Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, not a question, just a comment. I'm familiar with the gentleman that needed assistance out of Ocean City, and usually don't get reports like this, but he's home and doing fine.
Well, thank you. That is good news. I don't see any other hand. Okay, so we'll go to the liaison reports, and we'll start with the New England Council. Bobby?
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. The New England Fisheries Council met in December 2 through 4 in Newport, Rhode Island. There's been 2 press releases that are posted on our meeting page in the business section that have much more detail than I'm going to give you today. If you have any more questions about anything, you can follow up with Jason or me about which staff, New England staffer to kind of tender your questions to. As far as spiny dogfish, they didn't quite do what we did, but we've already kind of rectified that in the last couple of days. They had a small mesh multi-species. The council received a presentation on the 2024 annual monitoring report for the small mesh multi-species fishery, which indicates that the small mesh multi-species catches did not exceed the ACL except for an 18% overage of southern red hake. Most of the red hake is discarded and is associated with the squid fishery. The council supported the plan, the PDT's recommendations to defer applications of a red hake post-season accountability measure that would otherwise be applied in 26. A letter will be sent to GARFO to consider this request. Next year, the council will prepare new specifications for 2027 through 2029 after receiving a planned data update. The council revised their risk policy. They received an update from the risk policy working group. New England is aiming to have a new risk policy in place for 2027. There's still a lot of work to do in 2026. Pretty complicated process. The council is weighing various risk factors globally for each fishery, including quantitative and qualitative socioeconomic factors running through the PDT and the SSC process. New England will get more updates on in their January meeting, and I'm assuming after they have their meeting with the partnering group. Scallops, which should be of interest to this council. The council approved Framework Adjustment 40, which sets 36 days at sea for full-time limited access scallop permits for fiscal year their FY26. The framework also includes closures of Area 2, closed Area 2 south and extension, and Nantucket Lightship south and north. The council advanced measures affecting the northern Gulf of Maine, which account for a decline in the exploitable scallop biomass across the northern Gulf of Maine, including the Stellwagen Bank, where the majority of fishing effort is expected to occur in 2026. The council unanimously approved the scallop long-term strategic plan, a 3 to 5 year roadmap built from public input, research needs, and industry priorities. The plan outlines 9 objectives aimed at substantial, reliant, and profitability of fisheries that will guide the new projects launching in 26. As far as groundfish, the council voted to submit Framework Adjustment 72, which includes specifications for several groundfish stocks from fishing years 2026 through 2030. The Holistic Strategic Plan Initiative, which we heard about a little while ago, and we should have some more information from that after the workshop in January. And basically the rest of it was going over the 2026 council priorities and kind of rewriting them on the last day. So if there's plenty of information enclosed in the docket, and it should be in the brief material. And if you have any questions, Mr. Platts is over there.
All right, thank you, Bobby. So as Bobby mentioned, we do have Ted Platts here from our New England Council rep. So are there any questions on the New England Council update? Great, not seeing any. We'll move on to the South Atlantic Council, and Tom, do you have an update for us? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. My name is Tom Roller. I'm a council member from North Carolina, and I'm serving as the liaison for this meeting. As you can see, our liaison report was posted to your briefing book just, I think, yesterday. We met last week in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, and I'm just going to go over all the topics we discussed. The first order of business is our Deepwater Coral and Shrimp Amendment. That is Amendment 11. And just for some reference, this is in regards to our Deepwater Rock Shrimp fishery, which is a VMS managed fishery. And this looks at the boundary line of where they are currently allowed to trawl. We were scheduled to approve this amendment at the December meeting. However, because of the government shutdown, some sections of the amendment were not updated, specifically the socioeconomic data. And we decided, since that was not available, to suspend suspend the approval of the document and hold a special webinar on January 23rd in order to consider this final approval of the amendment. Our citizen science, we reviewed and adopted our updated citizen science research priorities, which incorporated input from our CITSI projects and operation advisory panels. This went through a lot of our goals and objectives, and strategy, which we look at every 5 years. And it's a really extensive amount of information, which, I could go into a little bit more, but this also looks at like indicators and which help us monitor and assess key components of the program. As always, Snapper Grouper dominated most of the discussion of the meeting. One of our big issues is we're looking at state management of red snapper. All 4 states of the South Atlantic have submitted an EFP application on November 10th, and we had presentations from each of the state representatives looking at what those would look like. We also received a presentation from the Florida delegation regarding their methodology and results from the year 1 of their EFP that was awarded to them in 2024. We had a lot of discussion regarding these EFPs, and our comments will be submitted in a letter in response to the EFPs, and a 30-day public comment period will be announced in the Federal Register. The next order of business was black sea bass. We received an overview in the public comment of Regulatory Amendment 37, which proposes an annual catch target well below the current ACL, which is a reduction in recreational bag limit, a 2-month spawning season closure for all sectors, which is February and March. We received a lot of public comment on this, and at this meeting, we opted to change the recreational bag limit from 2 fish to 3 fish, which shortens the season approximately 5 weeks. No changes to the minimum size limit, and we approved the amendment for submission to NOAA Fisheries and secretarial approval. So blue line tilefish, and when we talk about blue line tilefish, I'm going to channel my inner Dewey Hemmel right here. So we approved abbreviated framework 5 to implement catch level recommendations for blue line tilefish. Since the recommended ABC was in total removals, the total ACL will reduce by about 4% for discards. Including this adjustment resulted in approximately 80,000 pound increase in total ACL from the current level. A lot of the discussion, and again, I'm going to give Dewey credit for this, was when we have a fishery which has an increased ACL, the council discussed that our priority should be getting that fish on the table right away for our fishermen. And some of these other details we can put forward in an amendment later, which is our plan here. And we approved, and then after that discussion, we approved that. Golden tilefish, we presented the results of the revised golden tilefish stock assessment. This was revised because there was a discrepancy in the commercial landings, I believe, between the ACCSP and the Southeast Fisheries Science Center, which reran the stock assessment. Our current ACL is the current total ACL is set to increase in 2026, but the newly recommended ABC is slightly below this level, 1,000 pounds. Our council advised us that we will, since it's lower, we will have to submit this in an amendment. But given the small nature of it, we decided to not proceed with the abbreviated framework 4, and we're simply going to attach it to another snapper grouper FMP amendment in this upcoming year. Another big unit item of discussion was our snapper grouper fisheries management unit revision. Through the development of Amendment 61, the council identified 17 species to examine more in depth to determine whether the species should be removed from the fisheries management unit. The snapper grouper fishery, I believe, includes 54 different species, and many of these species are never going to be assessed, given comments from the Science Center. And we have SSC set, catch levels, and there's been a wide variety of opinions on this discussion, and we talked about it for several hours. We're going to get some more information in the future to consider. One of the big issues is we've discussed a lot. I'm scanning over this too quickly. But we discuss your unmanaged species report, and we're going to be doing the same thing at the South Atlantic and having staff present something similar to us every single year. The next item of business was the mutton and yellowtail snapper. This is mostly a Florida fishery. Through development of a joint snapper grouper Amendment 44 and Refish Amendment 55, the Gulf and South Atlantic Councils are responding to the most recent stock assessments for mutton and yellowtail snapper. They propose updating the OFL and ABC and the jurisdictional appointments between the council's regional ACLs and South Atlantic sector allocations for both sectors. We will review preliminary analysis at the March 2026 meeting. We had one item of other business to note. The council had a discussion and directed staff to compile information on council's parental leave policies and bring it to the next meeting of the executive committee to consider for council staff. With that, I conclude my report.
Great, thanks, Tom. Any questions for Tom on the South Atlantic update? Rich?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. You have issues with estimating recreational private boat landings for the tilefish species in the South Atlantic? If so, how do you deal with that?
That's a great question. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to answer that, but like all of these deep water species, they tend to have high PSEs, and it is a issue that we're discussing with most of our species, right? We have a big concern about it. I'm not sure what the next path is for that, but it's been a major topic of discussion, not just for blue line tilefish, but most of the species in our snapper grouper complex. So discards remain one of the biggest issues that we deal with.
So do you rely on the MRIP estimates then solely for those species? Okay.
Yeah, folks aren't able to hear yet for the most part, right, Tom? That is what happens both for the assessments and for management. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks. I don't see any other hands. Thank you, everyone, for those reports. We will move on to other business. I mentioned that we do have one item. The council has received an email from Oceana. So I'd like to give them a chance. If anyone is either here or online, please raise your hand. And I'm not seeing anyone. So as the email that went to council included a letter. Chris has already passed that on by email to council members. But Chris, do you want to give a little brief overview of that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just quickly, I think that the Oceana folks were going to be here this afternoon. Unfortunately, we won't be here this afternoon. So the email basically asked for our support. If you had a chance to look at it, the email that I forwarded was from Alexia Best Gill, who's a senior campaign associate for the Climate and Energy Campaign, excuse me, at Oceana. In her email, she notes that the administration has begun the process to create a new offshore drilling leasing schedule, 5-year plan. If you remember, we actually sent a letter into the administration, and she thanks us for the council's submission to the request for information in June. That was the letter that was attached to that email. So if you forgot that letter, you can take a look at it to review it. The letter highlighted the potential negative effects of drilling on the unaffected Atlantic coast. In the email, she says, I'm writing to let you know that Joseph and I will be at the Mid-Atlantic meeting tomorrow afternoon to give public comment requesting that the council submit a letter to the draft proposed program comment period, thanking the administration for removing the Atlantic from consideration, as well as raising the alarm for the upcoming RFI for potential deep sea mining off of Virginia. I look forward to speaking in front of the council. So obviously they're not here. I don't have much more than that. I would suggest that once we get notice of that RFI, says upcoming, which suggests that we haven't received it yet. I haven't seen it. I don't know if anyone else knows anything about it, but once we do get it, then we'll provide that to the council and see if in fact we want to make any comments, providing a letter. So that's all I have, Mr. Chair. Certainly, there may be some folks around the table that have more information about this than I do, or might be able to answer some questions. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Not seeing any hands on that item. That was the only other business that we're aware of. Is there any other business to come before us? Not seeing any. Okay. So last agenda item is just a chance for the public to comment. Are there any public comments? Okay, not seeing any. Well, that adjourns well, we can adjourn since there are no further agenda items. Oh, sorry, who do we have? Kevin Job, go ahead. Jim's up now. Okay, we'll give Jim a chance after. Go ahead, Kevin. All right, Kevin, if you're speaking, we can't hear you. I'm going to go to Jim Fletcher. Jim, go ahead.
I still have a question why the council will not require the recreational fishing in the EEZ to report on electronic apps or phones. It's the excuse that was used in the meeting before is the recreational don't like it. Well, the commercial didn't like it either when it started, but it got shoved down our throats. Now, why won't you shove it down the recreational folks? James Fletcher, United National Fishermen's Association. You're not doing your job. Thank you.
All right, Jim, thanks. I don't know. I was having some trouble. There was quite a bit of background noise there, so I apologize. I don't personally have an answer to your question there, but you know, feel free to reach out to me later. We can try and talk about that a bit. Kevin, I see your hand back up. Do you want to give it another try?
Yeah, let's give this another shot. Is this coming through?
Yeah, there you go.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it this morning. So good morning, everybody. My name is Kevin Job. I'm a senior fisheries biologist with the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection's DAGMIS Fisheries Program. So as you guys found your briefing materials, you'll notice our bureau chief submitted a letter regarding our concerns over the adverse localized impact that's the incidental take of river herring and the Atlantic mackerel fishery has had on the Connecticut river herring populations over the last 3 decades. This is a time during which efforts in the Atlantic mackerel fishery were greatly increased, and our blueback herring runs dropped from over 600,000 fish a year, which was in 1985, to just 570 individual fish in 2023. It was also highlighted in this letter that the river herring collapse occurred during a time in which we successfully reconnected hundreds of miles of river herring habitat through dozens of dam removals, over 50 fishway projects, and tens of millions of dollars of restoration work in an attempt to curtail the plummeting populations here in Connecticut. So to date, we've had a full moratorium on the commercial and recreational take of river herring in Connecticut since 2002, and populations currently sit at just 4% of our recovery targets to get these fisheries back online. This prevents the people of Connecticut from utilizing these species for commercial or recreational opportunities afforded to other states such as Maine and South Carolina, where populations are recovering. We felt it was important to note that in 2025, we had our best blueback herring year since 1997 in the face of greatly reduced mackerel effort since October of 2023. I'm here today because this is not just a New England problem. The last few years, we have tagged hundreds of river herring with acoustic tags to track at-sea movements. We are finding that our river herring spend the winter and spring moving between Cape Cod and southern New Jersey, often in the very areas historically fished by the Atlantic mackerel fleet during this time of the year. These data further highlight the need for increasing observer coverage in this fishery, an issue which has been highlighted by the industry, NOAA staff, and the concerned public comments at countless council meetings over the last few years. We understand the time and monetary constraints faced by the council and industry regarding increased observer coverage and researching biologically based catch caps. However, we also realize that the state and federal fisheries agencies, private and public municipalities, private dam owners, and a suite of NGOs and volunteers have invested hundreds of millions, largely of public tax dollars, into the in-river work to bring back herring populations that began crashing in the 1990s and early 2000s. Work has resulted in this area with little to no success across southern New England for our river herring runs. Similarly, in northern middle Atlantic states, most of the impact by the geographic genetic basis identified in the river herring sampled from incidental take in the mackerel fishery has occurred in these regions. Ignoring the impact of at-sea mortality of river herring in the Atlantic mackerel fishery and keeping non-biologically based catch cap status quo will not make this problem go away. Instead, we believe it's time for the state and federal fisheries agencies, the mackerel industry, and the council to start working together to better monitor and address at-sea incidental take of river herring and Atlantic mackerel fishery. We're happy to share data and work moving forward. Thank you for your time and consideration on this issue. They are both very much appreciated by all of us here in Connecticut. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you for the letter sent in as well. I don't see any other hands either in the room or online, so Now we will consider public comment closed. I will be adjourning our meeting here, and thank you all for your participation. Special thanks to staff for getting us through another meeting, and safe travels and happy holidays, everyone. I'll talk to you in the new year since we won't see everyone in February, but let's see you soon. Talk to you soon.